When we are young, we have no experience. When we are old, no one wants our experience. We live in a culture that worships youth. I do not watch them, but I read a little bit about the reality TV shows. I'm the one person in this room who has never watched any reality, Survivor, MTV, American Idol. I think they're all pagan and internet. Anyway, but it doesn't grab me. But I wonder why 35 million people were watching American Idol. And I mean, after all, it has the word idol in it. And my whole family is watching it. I go, that's an idol. Why are you watching it? But they watched it, and I had no interest whatsoever. But I'm reading about the design of these programs, and most of these concepts come out of 20-year-old minds. Most of Hollywood, most of the television programs that are very successful, although you may have a senior writer, a screenplay writer who's of some age and maturity, a lot of the ideas for the edgy stuff, the MTV stuff, which is pales today, is written by 20-year-old men and women. And we're in this television-adapted audience now that has moved to a YouTube audience. The number one search engine for those who are 20-ish and under is not Google or any of your normal domains. It's YouTube. They want to see how it's done. Case in point, my daughter had a used espresso machine I had gotten for her, and we were going to fix it. And so I'm looking for the PDF to download the manual so I can read and order the parts and so forth. And while I'm looking online to find the manual, she's over there finding the YouTube how to take it apart. And she beat me. And she goes, look, Dad, right here, we can see how it's done. And I go, I would have never thought to look for it on YouTube. So the world's changed a lot in a very short time. We are a mental fast food, 140 character, visually stimulated audience that no longer reads. If you read one book a year, you are considered in the top 7 to 10% of the American population. If you get into biographies and histories, it's in the single digits, like 3 to 4%. And that's one of the reasons we miss Nova, because you folks read, and you think, and you digest, and you debate. And in Nashville, we play guitars. We have a culture that clings to youth. The aging are forgotten. They're left behind. They're ignored. God has a very different perspective. If you open your Bible to Psalm 71, it is a psalm, as it will probably read in some little note above your text. In mine it says, prayer of an old man for deliverance, Ralph. Lou Preby came down and said, what do you know about being old? Well, I guess you're older. You win. I told Lou, it ain't the years, it's the miles. That's not original with me, but this is what God's take is on aging. And I've called it a prayer for maturity. We don't like to admit we're old or older. None of us seem to. My dad, when he was in his 80s, said, anybody under 65 is a young fella. That was his perspective, so I'm still very young. Some of you know scholars Kyle and Delitzsch, 10-volume Hebrew commentary set, and they titled this psalm, Prayer of a Gray-Headed Servant of God for Further Divine Aid. I don't think they meant it to be funny. Prayer of a gray-headed servant of God for further divine aid. They were a little verbose. But I want to look at this under 4 headings, and I want to try to weave a little bit of stories and friendship and appreciation for Ralph in as we go. The first is the reality of aging. I never do this. They're all ours. The reality of aging, the richness of aging, the resources of aging, and the rewards of aging. And I'll repeat those for those of you who didn't get it. The reality of aging. Look in your Bible. Clint was kind to read some of it. Let's read. If you've got a NASB, New American Standard Bible, you're going to read aloud with me tonight, okay? We're going to read verses 1, 2, and 3, responsive. We're going to read it together in unison, and I'm going to start us, read as Clint said, well, it is the Word of God. In you, O Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be ashamed. In your righteousness, deliver me and rescue me. Incline your ear to me and save me. Be to me a rock of habitation to which I may continually come. You have given commandment to save me, for you are my rock and my fortress. Note the terms in your Bible. Look at your text. Refuge, deliverer, rescue, save, rock, fortress, rescue. It goes on. These are terms of, you in the military understand this far better than I ever could, but the high place is better. You want to have a fortress. If and when it is God's will for you to go to Israel, and when you go to Israel, you will probably go to Masada, down in the south. There's no technical biblical significance to the site, but over the times I have been there, I have become convinced it was one of David's strongholds. The word stronghold in your New American Standard Bible is always a rendering of Metsuda, the gloss Masada. And so when you go see what Herod did to it, of course, it's quite different than what it would have been in David's time. But the flora and fauna change, water levels change, mountains don't move, streams don't move, valleys don't move. So when you go up to Masada, now in a cable car and drive and ride down, it's so easy. It used to take 3 hours to get up and about 45 to get down, but now you just ride. But you go up to Masada and you can see for miles. It's a stronghold because you're up high enough to see the enemy coming. And so the reality of aging is the psalmist here is saying, you, God, are my stronghold. He's putting his trust in something other than his experience or his wisdom or his years or his wealth or whatever. He makes the choice in the declarative part of this psalm to say, you, O Lord, in you I've taken refuge. In you I have put my trust. In you, you're the one who's delivered me. You have rescued me. And then he starts the petition, will you incline your ear to me and save me? So we get a hint at the beginning he's in trouble. He will come back to that. I want to make 3 observations from this text and further about this reality of aging. Number 1, there is the loss of former strength. Number 1, the loss of former strength. Drop down to verse 9. Do not cast me off in the time of old age. Do not forsake me when my strength fails. As we get older, our strength fails. One of the, we all have our stories. One of mine with the back issues, everyone is forever grabbing my briefcase, my suitcase, helping me, don't bend over. They're always trying to help me. My wife is just ridiculous about doing things for me. And I'm like, I can do this one. And she goes, stop it. Gets rather unchristianly mad at me. And I really can. They said 9 pounds was okay. I'm going to do it for you. Even Jim's fighting me. Jim, what are you doing lifting that stuff? And I don't like for people to do that stuff for me. I know I got to receive it, but I go, I don't like you to do that for me. Ralph, you're 10 years older than me, but you're in a lot better shape than me. The reality of aging is different for all of us, but I love the way he says, don't cast me off in my time of old age. Don't cast me off. Don't forsake me when my strength fails. I can't remember where I found this. It was John Wesley's journal entry. Some of you have heard me use this before. I love it. June 28, 1789. That's just 7 days from today. June 28, 1789. This day I enter my 86th year, he writes. I now find I grow old. 1, my sight is decayed, so I cannot read small print unless a strong light. 2, my strength is decayed so that I walk much slower than I did some years since. 3, my memory of names, whether person or places, is decayed till I stop a little to recollect them. What I should be afraid of is if I took thought of the morrow, that my body would weigh down my mind and create stubbornness, the decrease of my understanding or peevishness, by the increase of my bodily infirmities, but thou shalt answer me, O Lord my God. Sight, strength, memory. You remember the day when you didn't need these? Boy, those are really dirty. I had premature cataracts and had my lenses replaced 2-3 years ago, whatever it was. Biggest mistake I've ever made. I carry 3 sets of glasses. I have bifocals, a set for my computer, and the super cheaters. And it was a huge mistake on my part to do it. You all look like Vaseline. It's just, that was another thing, a joyful thing. Thank you, Jesus. I get to endure. I remember when my mom used to say, Michael, can you read this label for me? And now I'm saying, Cindy, can you read this label for me? She goes, no, I got to get my glasses. And we're both toast. And you find yourself, you turn the light on. I mean, you got to have the Optolight, right? And you're looking under the thing and you're going, I can't read this. And goodness sakes, okay, we're all getting older and we take lots of prescriptions. Why do they print the prescriptions that big? I mean, come on, give us a break. Is there a giant print version out there somewhere? I used to play racquetball 2-3 times a week with Jim McKay and Jim Dooley. Some of you remember them. Smiling Jim Dooley. Still miss his laugh. Best laugh I ever heard. We'd go out to the Annandale courts over here. He'd clean my clock playing racquetball. Bob Riera would clean my clock with one eye closed, his right hand behind his back, barely looking at me. I used to do my yard work. I used to detail my cars, change the brakes. I wasn't great at anything, but I was good at a lot of things. I could do everything. I could fix pretty much anything except electricity, which Ralph did for me, and plumbing, which I would hire somebody, and I could pretty much take care of everything else. Now I pay people to do it poorly. You get that. I hate it. I hate it. The loss of former strength. Number 2, the ongoing struggles of life. We see it both in verse 4 and verse 10. Verse 4, rescue me, O my God, out of the hand of the wicked, out of the grasp of the wrongdoer, the ruthless man. Verse 10, he refers again to the enemy. For my enemies have spoken against me, and those who watch for my life have consulted together. Dr. Marvin Tate writes, the psalmist may have expected mature age would bring the exemption from such attacks, but such is not the case. Did you think when you got older, not that you are, but did you think when you got older the attacks would lessen? I think I did. Maybe I didn't articulate it, but somewhere in there I thought, you get older, the things sort of cool down. Some of identification. Some of us have a friend here in town we know very well, 72 years of age, and he gets attacked and loses the church that he built for 27 years. I called him when that was going on, and the papers were eschewing him, and miserable experience. I said, who am I to tell you this, but I will say one thing. Had this happened when you were 30, you'd have blown it apart. But God has given you, to quote F.B. Meyer, his vote of confidence that at this stage of your life, you will know how to face it. We might have lost our strength, but we do have something, as we'll see in the psalm, that you're going to have the ability to deal with that you didn't have when you were 30 and thought you could. Now, I think the psalmist is talking about national struggles and enemies, but I don't think it's a stretch to apply it to finances, to grown children, to ethnic prejudice, which 10, 15, 20 years ago, our country was very different. We as a body of Christ should be the most welcoming, embracing people of all ethnos. We are to make disciples of all ethnos, that's the word, all nations, not just the ones that look like us. Naysayers, critics, a parent or sibling. How many, don't raise your hand, of us adults, still our parents can wear us out? We have many friends, Cindy and I do in Nashville, who their parents are at that stage where it's just hard, and no matter what you do, it's wrong. You could do 25 to-do lists, and they would still be unhappy with the way you did it, or that you didn't get 26 done. I remember John Hannah saying, if you met everyone, if you gave everyone you met $100 bill, some would be mad about the way you handed it to them. And sometimes we're going to have difficult people. You know, when children are little, it was the age thing we used to do. It's probably abused today. When our children were little and they whined, we sent them to their room. We said, you can whine in your room, but you can't whine around us. When you get the whining done, come back out. Where do you send adults when they whine? The first reality of aging is the loss of strength. The second reality of aging is the ongoing struggles of life. The third reality of aging is the struggle of loneliness. Look at verse 11. Saying, God has forsaken him, pursue him, seize him, there's no one to deliver. Now again, the psalmist is referring, I would argue, to someone that wants him dead. Certainly, the longer we live, the fewer friends we have. Friends move, friends die. As my mentors have died and passed, as my dad has passed away, I watched this up close and personal, trying to continue to love people in their 70s and 80s. And I love trying to do that, but I grieve for them because they will say, all our friends are dying. All our friends are gone. My mother, 86, with a host of health problems, has one friend in the neighborhood. And they have an interesting relationship. Kind of a love-hate thing. But it's her only friend. Michael, all my friends are gone. Your father's gone. She's sad. She misses her husband of 62 years. I get that to a degree. What do you do in your 70s and 80s? You go to a lot of funerals. It's a reality. Younger people are busy. They're too busy. That's the reality. Let's move on. The richness of aging. There's a great advantage. The psalmist acknowledges there's some realities, but he also talks about some riches, some wealth, some benefits of aging. And we all learn that other people can disappoint us, but a maturing believer grows even in these contexts, hopefully. And while many complain and whine, there are some riches. Let me just point out two from the psalm. The first is the benefit of knowing the Lord a long time. The benefit of knowing the Lord a long time. And that gives us confidence. Look again at verse 5. For you are my hope, O Lord God. You are my confidence from my youth. By you I have been sustained from my birth. You are he who took me from my mother's womb. My praise is continually of you. Some versions in verse 6 say, David relied on the Lord from his youth. I believe that's a misrendering. It literally says, by you I have been sustained. He looks at his life and goes, hey, from the moment I was born from the womb, you're the one that sustained me to this very day. Not unlike what Cindy mentioned and I shared this morning. When we look back on our life, why should we doubt God? He's been faithful to this very day. By the way, you're here tonight. No matter your situation, has he been faithful to you to today? If you got up, you slept some, you ate some, you drove in a vehicle, you had a roof over your head, you sang some songs that hopefully you engaged, maybe you saw some friends, he was faithful to you today. We forget this. By you I have been sustained. So as you look back and I look back, do you see that God's been taking care of us? How many of you have ever built a home? Don't be ashamed. Put your hand real high, real high, real high. We built a home. Did it turn out perfect? I would hate to have seen the punch list that you and Ron Urice had on the atrium. Was that year 7 of year 8? Was the punch list? There's something wrong with everything. Design it the way you want it. And you go, why did I do that? That was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. You learn. But you can look back on, you've known God for a long time, and it gives you confidence to face the future. Polycarp was being taken to the arena to be eaten by lions. He was given the option of paying tribute to Caesar or tossed as entertainment. His friends were pleading with him. Quote, what harm is there in saying Caesar is Lord and burning incense and saving yourself? Polycarp said, for 86 years I have been Christ's slave. He has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme him who has saved me? When you've known Christ a long time, you can look back and have a confidence. He's been with me to this day. Why in the world would I not trust him for tomorrow? One of the riches of aging is the benefits of knowing God for a long time. Ralph, you've known the Lord a long time. I love seeing the picture last night. I did not know that story about Pastor Hartman back in the Mennonite church. That was a sweet picture. He sustained you to this very day. Polycarp was old and frail. His faith was rich. The second benefit, you will become a marvel. This is an interesting verse 7, Psalm 71. I have become a marvel to many, for you are my strong refuge. Marvel is a complicated word in our Old Testament. It can mean a number of things. It can mean a marvel, like if you saw the signs and wonders, it was a marvel to both the Israelites and the Egyptians. It's awesome. When we saw the tsunami effects, it was a marvel. It was horrible and powerful. Got the idea? So that's one of the ways the word marvel is used. J.J. Perone writes, to understand applying this as the whole of his wonderful life of trials and blessings. A wonderful life of trials and blessings and deliverances, such did not fall ordinarily to a man. Ralph mentioned Spencer Brand. Some of you know the Brands. And Barbara is one of Cindy's and my heroes, as well as Spencer. The traffic cancer here tonight, they are our heroes. Johnny has become a hero. Johnny Erickson Todd and Ken to me. Listen again. To understand is applying his whole wonderful life of trials and blessings, of perils and deliverance, as such did not fall ordinarily to a man. Johnny has been very candid with Cindy and me. She would not mind me sharing this. I've heard her share it on television with her, and she talks about it. She calls it her toiletries. It takes 2 women 2 hours in the morning to get her ready and 2 hours at night to put her to bed. Every single day. Throughout the day, umpteen times, Ken or 2 of the women that travel with her have to stop recording, have to stop whatever, and he has to work on her diaphragm to get the phlegm out of her because she no longer has the ability to cough phlegm up. If you don't know her story, you need to go and read it. But in recent years, upon from being quadriplegic for 47 years in a wheelchair, she has had a double radical mastectomy because of breast cancer. And now she deals with a neuropathic pain in her spine. They cannot figure out why she's in pain. How can you be a quadriplegic and they cut on you and not feel it, but your spinal column is sending nerve signals to your brain? And she never complains. And I'm mobile and I can drive. I can see, sort of. And I go, wow, that's the marvel. I think of Barbara Brand, the ministry she has with the pain she lives with. I think of the traffickants, the ministry they have with all they've been through. And I go, And Job is a phrase that says, when he used to speak, the young men would cover their mouths. It's always been a mystery to translators. We overstudy stuff. When someone's speaking an amazing, I see Bob McEwen sitting over here to my left. I can't see that. When Bob McEwen speaks, my mouth hangs open and I go, dang, how does he know all that stuff? How does he remember that stuff? And it's a marvel, and it's of course unseemly to have your mouth going. So what do? That's a marvel. Your life's become a marvel to others. Right? When I think of a 10-year-old boy with his mother coming home from the hospital with the baby in her arms, and your dad abandons you, you're a marvel to me. It didn't happen in those years. Today it's blasé. It didn't happen in those years. You're a marvel to me. The way God has used you. Reality of aging. We'll lose strength. We become lonely. We'll struggle. The richness of aging. We have confidence in God as we look back over our lives. And we may become a marvel to others if they listen to our story, big if. Third, the resources of aging. Look at verses 17 and 18 for a moment, please. Oh God, you've taught me from my youth, and I still declare your wondrous deeds. And even when I'm old and gray, oh God, do not forsake me until I declare your strength to this generation, your power to all who are to come. The resources of aging, if we look back, and you know this as well as I do, if you've had aging parents or you visit nursing homes, rest homes, what we call independent living, whatever you want to call it today, it's politically correct. When you visit these places, there are two kinds of people. They're bitter and they're sweet. Real easy to differentiate in a moment, isn't it? Mad at the world, or they're the sweetest people in the universe. Which do you want to be? Which do you want to be? When Carol Holly was fading from all the ports, he was a sweet man. Elise and I were talking this morning, and we were hugging and reminiscing, and she would say, Carol always said, "You're my favorite pastor." He would greet me at this door early in the morning on Sunday, and I always said the same thing, "You're my favorite pastor's father." And we exchanged that every day, every Sunday. And there were times I could tell that he wasn't quite in the zone, but he had that Carol Holly smile. "There's my favorite pastor." He said it to all the pastors, I know that. As we live, we draw upon the resources of our past, knowing that God has permitted to live to this day. To be transparent with you, there are days when I talk to my mother on the phone and she wants to die. And she will cry and she will say, "It's wrong that God takes one spouse. He should take both at the same time." I want to say, "Take it up with him, Mom," And I tell her the same thing every time. I say, "Mom, you're the toughest woman I've ever known. You're the most sacrificial woman I've ever known. I know it's hard. I know it's hard. But it's not God's time. Your life's important. All I do is," and she goes down the litany. Now, I'm guilty sometimes of putting her on speakerphone around Cindy, and we just listen. We listen to what she had for breakfast and what she had for lunch, and she describes a little sauce in there, a little butter, a little, she goes the whole thing. It's like the recipe, and we smile. But when she cries, it breaks my heart. My mom shouldn't cry. I was a little boy that cried to Mom. Mom's crying to her adult son. We have the responsibility to tell others of God's work, of His strength and His power. Look again, 17. Declare your strength to this generation, your power to all who come. Time out. This is hard. The worst way to begin a conversation with a younger person is what? When I was your age, you just shut the door. You just shut the door. And this is where I would say to you, those of you, many of you in this room, I'm not saying you all should do it, but for almost 2 years I taught our equivalent of venture. We called it inversion. Young adults, 20-somethings to early 30s. And these are Vanderbilt students, masters, PhDs, MD students, PA students, law students, some bright young men and women. And when I touched on the subject of the mentor relationships that I was very blessed to have, I will have guys line up and ask me, will you mentor me? Now, the key to that is not, when I was your age. The key to that, those of you who are 20 or 30s, plug your ears. The 20s and 30s worship dialogue, and they hate advice because they think they know something. And a wise and a mature, godly, elderly person, and elderly can be relative, is a person who realizes you can't say, when I was your age, let me tell you how to do it. Because they worship dialogue. They think they know something. And if you're kind and smart, you let them tell you something. Another key I have found is it's not to say, I learned many years ago. It's the same as when I was your age. But just a nuance. You know what I'm learning right now? You know what I just read in Psalm 71 today? They'll listen to that. The other key operative word I've found is, let me get your opinion on something. What do you think about? Because they love the dialogue. It takes a long time. It's frustrating as all get out. It's fatiguing as all get out, but the rewards are amazing. There are young men and women in this church that need mentors. How many marriages are failing? How many late to get married young men and women do we have? Some of you know Cindy and I, we started it here. We started a 2-year marriage mentor program. We made it up as we went. We had 3 marriages. I officiated 2, maybe all 3 of them. I didn't do the pre-marriage counseling caveat. But 3 marriages, and they failed within the first 2 years. I went to the parents, I went to the individuals, said, let's help, let's come together, and they were done with it. It was Mary Popenoe, is it Mary Popenoe? Did a study on it. The Census Department came up with a term called starter marriage. First marriage, no children, divorce within the first 3 years, 3 to 5, depending on the way they measure things. And we got to start our house. We need a new house. And the articles and literature were disheartening as they interviewed these couples getting out of starter marriages. And if you were in that situation, I don't mean to rub salt in your wounds. I'm just talking about data. So we had 3 of them that failed, and I went to them, and it was frustrating. We were in a wonderful small group with some very close friends, and I said, Cindy, we're gonna stop our small group, and we're gonna do something different because pre-marriage counsel ain't working. And so we started this 2-year marriage mentor program under the thesis that they needed a long-term relationship with a couple that was a little further down the road. They need to learn how to study the Bible, how to think theologically, and how to do marriage. We did the first group here. We had the celebration, was it how many years ago? 2 summers ago, and that was 10 years with our first group. And how many children were in that group? 31 children? A lot. More than I wanted around. But anyway, Immanuel was kind enough to give us one of the rooms, so we met up there. We brought in some catered food, and we started dinner at about 6 p.m., and I think it was 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. I hadn't been up that late in years, and we were going around the room talking about highs and lows in our lives since that group, and I wish we had captured it. It was holy ground stuff. Horrific, wonderful, terrible, awful, incredible stuff. Some of those couples have blown us away with what they've done. So we went to Nashville. Couldn't do it when I was in Chicago for our life, but we went to Nashville. We started it again. We finished a group 4 or 5 years ago, our first group. We learned a little bit more about how to select these couples. These couples are knocking it out of the park. Bring them in our home. We go through Living by the Book. We do Don Meredith's Fill in the Blank on Two Become One. I take the Moody Handbook of Theology and make them read about 65% of it. And by the halfway point, I'm assigning the young men to lead the group. And I meet with all the guys one-on-one for lunch on a rotating basis. And we minister to them, and we love them. We take them out to dinner. We have them in our home. We meet every Sunday night for 2 hours. Sometimes they leave 2 or 3 hours. It's fine. We love them like crazy. And we had started a new group almost a year ago. We've not seen them for about 30, 40 days because of my back. But we'll next weekend, God willing, we'll resume back in our house. They're meeting with another couple, and they're doing great. But to watch the differential, that first group, second group, and third group now that we've done, they're completely different generations. And we've got to learn, because we're supposed to be the wise ones with the experience and knowledge of God to be able to adapt it to a next generation. But I will tell you this, they are dying for mentors. And if you're sitting in this room and you're an empty nester or close to it, and you're sitting on your theological laurels, there is a gold mine of young couples that would do anything to be in your home on a regular basis with a Bible study and talking about marriage and family and when to have children. And now both of them want to work. That was anathema in the 50s. They all want to keep their jobs and careers. And we're navigating, how do you help couples that want to have high-powered jobs and capacities, and the economy is different, and all these things that we're learning with them. Grandparents, you got the same opportunity. Grandparents, let me tell you a secret. You can teach your kids about Jesus in ways their parents cannot. And they will remember what Paw and Pop and Grandma said. They will. You ever thought about, why is it that this little innocent, being not exposed to evil baby will glom onto this old weird guy? Think about that. The grandma part I get, because she's loving and cuddly and gives them sugar. I get that part. But when you got the old guy and that little grandbaby crawls up into your lap and thinks you hung them up, what is that? It's God's gift to living long enough. As Howard Hendricks oft said, grandchildren are the reward God gives you for not killing your teenager. Reality of aging. We'll lose strength, we'll struggle, we'll be lonely. The richness of aging, a confidence in God, and you may be a marvel to others. They may close their mouth in awe as they hear your story. Thirdly, the resources of aging. You've got the resources from living long enough. Now the question is, do you have the responsibility to do something about it, or will you sit idly by? Fourth, the rewards of aging. I just want to note two. Psalm 71, verse 22, I will also praise you with the harp, even your truth, O my God. To you I will sing praises with the lyre, O Holy One of Israel. My lips will shout for joy when I sing praises to you, and my soul, which you have redeemed. My tongue also will utter your righteousness all day long, for they are ashamed, for they are humiliated who seek my hurt. The psalm ends now looking at the present, and he acts on words and speaks about God's righteousness. Just two under this category of the rewards of aging. The first one is you know and you have experienced God's righteousness. 5 times in the psalm, righteousness is referred to. Righteousness is another big term. It's simply, to reduce it to a Ralph definition, it's a function of justice. I would say it this way. Righteousness is always doing the right thing in the right way. And we have a God and King who always does the right thing in the right way. We may not see it on this side of the glass. On that side of the glass, we will see it. He always did the right thing in the right way. It's a very simple definition, but it helps me remember what it means. The righteous actions of Yahweh typically are deliverance and salvation. Deliverance from harm, from the enemy, from the sea, whatever the trouble might be, but there's a double entendre. We're delivering from death. He delivers us in salvation. So the first reward of aging is you've known and you've experienced God's righteousness. Not all of life has been an injustice. There are some things that have happened to you and me that we look back on and God worked that out in a way that I could not find the forest for the tree. Second aspect of this reward of aging is you've known and experienced God's faithfulness. You've known and experienced God's faithfulness. In a sense, the whole psalm is about this. This underscores it. I mentioned it again this morning. That was one of the imprints, Cindy, the dozen, 15 of those defining moments where Cindy said something to me and it was cemented in my brain, and my life has been blessed and good, and we've changed because of something she has said or done. And it was the sofa story. If you weren't here this morning, it was one of my darkest points before my first surgery, and I asked her, how do you go on with this? Because I don't know how to go on. And she said, with her eyes closed, I look back on God's faithfulness to us to this day. Why would He not be faithful to us tomorrow? And I needed to hear that, and I need to hear it. Well, Charles Simeon retired at 1836. He was 54 years of ministry at the Holy Trinity Church in Cambridge. A friend was walking one day at 4 a.m. Why, I don't know. But he saw Simeon, and he was at 4 a.m. kindling a fire in his little study and having his time alone with the Lord. And the friend knocked on the door and said, Mr. Simeon, you're retired. You're a little older now. Why don't you make things a little easier for yourself? Why don't you get someone to help you? Why get up at 4 in the morning to do this? What? Replied Simeon. Shall I not run with all my might when the winning post is in sight? You know, some of us, as we get older, have to get up at 4 in the morning, so you may as well get out of bed. It's a rare psalm. It's a worshiper psalm. We've just not even brushed it. Here are some things he prayed for. He prayed for deliverance from enemies. He prayed as he was out of a lifelong fellowship with God, he prays that he will see God's protection from his birth until today. He prays to God as a refuge, a strength, a shelter. He prays to God who continued to care for him in his youth and in his old age. You think back on your youth, and you think back of all the times you should have died. Teenage, driving, nonsense, whatever you did. Of course you didn't, I did. Why I lived this long. He prays about God as a refuge, a shelter. He prays God as an acknowledgement that there is no God but and like Yahweh. He prays knowing that God has delivered him in the past and prays he will deliver him in the future. And he prays God that he will still have breath to tell others about him. When I met Ralph, as Sharon Sachs shared so beautifully and eloquently last night, I wish I could write like her. She shared a story a little bit about Ralph's, we'd call it today abandonment by his father. And I've thought often about Ralph at 10 years of age and thought, what does a 10-year-old boy, 1957, is that right? In Philadelphia, I think that's where you're from, Pennsylvania. What does a 10-year-old boy do in 1957 when his sister comes home as an infant and his mom is now abandoned by her husband? I would argue, Ralph, God told you at that point in some way, shape, or form, you're now a steward. Something clicked in Ralph's brain, I'm convinced, and it was, I'm going to take care of my mom. In some way, shape, or form, whatever a 10-year-old mind could process, you were the man of the house. Your father inasmuch as told you that, if I remember. You're going to be the man now, in some way, shape, or form. Ralph, you may not be up front like Jesse or me or, thank God, like Steve Hawley. What y'all don't understand is we've been the butt of Steve Holly's jokes for all these years, but it's really rare to get the chance to give it back to him. So it's quite joyful to be here for that reason only. But whatever that switch was, you started to become a man. And as I think back on, those of you who don't know Ralph closely, when he's going out of town, he sends us an itinerary of where he's going to be, when, how, what, why, and so forth and so on. And I love reading it because I love Ralph and I love the detail he puts in there. And I can just see him, girls, doesn't he have this sort of, it's sort of a grr and an H tone. He goes, he does. You know what I'm talking about? And it's one of those Ralphisms. I never can figure it out, but he does it once in a while. And I read the email and I can hear it in the email. God is my witness. I've never known a man who has taken care of his mother like you have. And watching the clock so that you were faithful to your stewardship here as an employee of a fellowship of Immanuel Bible Church, and to get in your truck and go to Pennsylvania to help your mother. You honored God. You honored your mom. I know you're not a guy that likes transparency and all that in front of a group. I know that. But you got to receive this. You ministered to all of us by taking care of your mom, Edna. You drugged me up to Philly once. We did the quick tour, praise God. Got to meet Edna one time. Got to brag on you a little bit in front of you. He's over there. Tim mentioned it on the video last night. Tom Joyce mentioned it. And when my dad died, I thought about you. And I went to see my mom every other month the first year till they about killed us both. And I thought of you every time I got on that plane and rented that car and drove to her house and fixed 27 things and didn't get 28 done. And I thought about, Ralph has been doing this for years. And my esteem went up all the more. Seems to me you're the steward. You've got a unique ability to enter where others don't want to tread. You and I have walked into, and others would attest to, many situations where we'd be going, but Ralph's like, we have to go do this. I was here less than a year, well, I guess 18 months. Steve Holly can remember the date and time. It was 18 months after I came, and a little kerfuffle happened. That's nothing compared to recent years, right? That wasn't even a speed bump, baby. That wasn't a speed bump in the life of Immanuel. And Cindy and I had gotten back from a Family Life Weekend to Remember conference, and Steve Holly calls, and before cell phones, Michael, have you read your mail? No. Well, when you do, call me. Click. True story. The famous line became, I'd like to read a letter. Some of you were around those days. And I read this letter, and we started having all sorts of emergency meetings, and it was kind of exciting. And I was the new kid on the block. I knew that. I was 37 maybe. And I went to Ralph, and why should these pastors or elders trust me? I was a new kid. I knew that. I was smart enough to know that. And I went to Ralph, and I closed the door in his office. I said, I need to ask you something. I said, if I need to leave this church before it splits, I'm serious, if I need to leave this church before it splits, you have to be the one to tell me. I don't know who else to ask, because I won't split a church. It won't be about me. Little did I know, I kept the guy awake for nights. because he owned it. And he would tell me the story later. Michael, I can't believe you asked me to do that. And I've thought often about why I turned to you. There were many I could have turned to. It wasn't right or wrong, but I've concluded the reason I turned to you, I trusted you the moment I met you. And I still trust you. You and I have shared secrets and stories. And I know when you say, I won't tell anybody about this, I know I can believe you. It worked both ways. But I can remember many times me coming into your office kvetching and whining and complaining and sounding like a child. And you'd listen and you'd go, Michael? And you'd tell me some unrelated story. And I remember conflicts we had with staff. I know you don't have any now, but we did in those days because I was here. And Ralph would come into my office and close the door, and I'll use Steve because he's the end of my joke today. I would use Steve, and he'd go, Michael, this is not true. It's just exemplary. He'd say, Michael, I know you and Steve are having some trouble. And I know you're having some conflict. You need to go take him out to lunch. I don't want to take him out to lunch. You need to go pursue him. All right, Ralph. And I would take whoever out to lunch, and we'd chat and talk, and things would change. And Ralph would come to me and say, I know you don't like such and such and such and such. Everybody else knows you don't like such and such and such. But if you encourage them, it might be a little different. Oh, you're right again. For almost 12 years, you did that for me. That's a steward. Steward has stuff, and he helps others use their stuff. And you were a steward of that. And that was not in your wheelhouse as a high S. That was a skill you developed. I will never forget when our dear, beloved J.T. Walker died. Walker's here tonight. I can't see a thing with these lights. There they are. The $1 million smile and the $1 million laugh. Too early in life. Enid came through with the kids and swept through JT's office, and part of her process, she was kind of done. And so, I don't know how many weeks went by. Ralph and Sharon and I were in mourning up there because it wasn't the same with JT coming in, saying wonderful things. And at some point, we called Enid back. Enid, there's a lot of stuff in JT's office. What are we going to do with it? She said, we've been there. We've got what we want. Ralph's going, Tom Coles brings up a 55-gallon drum with wheels on it with a garbage bag in it and puts it in JT's office. Sharon's going, So Ralph and I go in there. It's a holy thing to go through a man's possessions. Pictures of Campus Crusade beach projects back when he was 12. Look, 12. And we saved a box and we said, we can't throw, it's just wrong to throw this stuff away. Of course, other stuff was not an issue. Receipts from 1980. I think we're okay to toss that stuff. Books that were maybe not that important, others we set aside. And I don't remember, Enid 3-4 times said, do you want any of this? And we just couldn't bring ourselves to throw. We know a man's life does not consist of his possessions, but to throw stuff out, it just was complicated. And so we'd be over there reading through Campus Crusade stuff was Ralph's thing, of course. And we'd be, I remember beach projects or whatever, and we'd be laughing and crying. Videotapes or cassettes that were stuck together, we can throw those out. And all of a sudden, about an hour or so, Ralph disappeared. And I'm there on the floor by myself with all this stuff going, what do I do with this stuff? And I go and Ralph, where are you? You abandoned me. You're derelict. Get back here. And he goes, And he said, 2 hours is my limit. And with tears in his eyes, he says, I just can't do it anymore. And a day or two would go by, and we'd say, come on, we got to hit it again. And we nibble away at his stuff. I learned you can only bear so much grief at one time. You can only take it in bite-sized pieces. How do you unpack a man's life and ministry? And we laugh and we cried and we take a break. I don't remember precisely the time. I was sort of forced onto a mini sabbatical of, 4, 5, 6 weeks. In those days, everybody else got a year off or whatever. I think they gave me like 6 weeks off, and it was pretty miserable, actually. And so I come back from the sabbatical, and Ralph says to me, he says, he interacted with me. I'm leaving on sabbatical, but there's this conference in Atlanta. And I said, okay, because I trusted him. We're on the plane literally from DCA to Atlanta, and we're sitting in the back of cheap seats that he got, and always a deal. And we're sitting in the back with our knees in our chests, and I'm going, so where are we going? And he goes, didn't you read what I sent you? I said, I was on sabbatical, remember? And he goes, didn't you know what we're going to? And I said, Ralph, I trust you. Don't worry about it. What are we doing? I literally didn't know where we were going. And he pulls out this thing, and it's a Crown Financial Peace, a Crown Generous Giving seminar. I go, okay, cool. And he's all worried and sweating that I'm unhappy. And I'm like, no, this is cool. We'll be there for a couple days. We go and we hear the speakers, and one of the speakers was a friend of mine. He stood up and he said, I've gone through Crown Financial Bible Studies 3 times. One when I got married, second when my first child was born, second when my child entered high school as we prepared for college. My jaw dropped. And said, you did a fill-in-the-blank Bible study 3 times in your life? This guy had the same pedigree I had. And I went, you got to be kidding me. And we heard testimonies and whatnot all day long. Got back on the plane. I said, was this a guise to get me to go through Crown? I mean, is that what you're after? And he's, you know. And so I said, okay. And so I come back and I said, Cindy, I think we need to do this. And we handpicked some close friends. I said, here's the deal, Ralph. You got to lead it. Some of you in this room are in that study. And we met in our house for, 12 weeks and change. And Ralph and Katie were there, and they led the study. Couldn't participate if you didn't say your verse. Can't comment if you didn't fill in the blanks. Do your homework. No legalism around here. Anyway, I watched a transformation occur in every one of the couples in that room that was nothing short of life change. Changed all of our lives in ways we did not anticipate. Jim and Vicki Nellis were in the group, and Vicki, of course, taught us about giving. Vicki and Jim taught us so many things, but Vicki's generosity always dismantled Cindy and me. And I know, I get all this flack when I tell this story, but we went from giving 10, 12% to giving 20, 25% simply because Vicki Nellis was giving 20%. I said, if grace is generosity, and generosity isn't a tithe or a tip, would make sense that we'd be open-handed with what God's given us. Jim Dooley once said, standing up here, I can live better on 90% of my income than I can on 100% of my income. And Cindy and I can tell you, after how many years we changed, we can live better on 75, 80% of our income than we can 100% of our income. Just choices, it's stewardship, it's not magic. But all of us changed our lives because of that. You were being a steward. You didn't pester me, you didn't bother me, you didn't nag me. Christian and Erica Pinkston were in that group. You here? They're derelict. Where are they? Are you here? Children's ministry. I'll retract that statement. Christian and Erica were in that group. I'll let you let them ask the questions that changed their lives. But one thing we did is we all had these sort of statements, and I codified them into a 2-page document, statements that stuck out to me. And I'll never forget one that Christian said. Listen to the context before you react. He said, "A wine steward knows everything about wine." He'd read that in a book somewhere, I think. But he elaborated on that and said, wine stewards, it's the most complicated thing in the world to make, and they know everything about our agriculture and, all the vineyard blendings, aging, all that stuff, tannins, all that nonsense. And then he went on to say, if we're stewards of what God has given us, we need to know everything about what God has given us to be stewards. I have a lot of friends. The friendless American male speaks to too many in this world. If you call Ralph White's your friend, would you stand up? Look around, Ralph. These people love you. These people consider you their friend. It's a result of your stewardship. It's a result of who you were. Jesse said it earlier, you don't retire from a job, but you might retire from a job, but don't retire from ministry. Our friend Prof would say, what are you going to do? Move to Sarasota and blow out an aorta? In an image you appreciate more than most, he said, I see too many people sliding for the bench. The role changes, the hat changes. I know you're going to be a steward still. I know you and Katie are a team. I know you love each other. I know you love Christ. I know you love your daughters and now these fine, strapping young sons-in-laws. May God grant you grandchildren to give you delight and babysitting for your children. You're a godly man. You're a good friend. You're a great steward. And I'm convinced God is not through with you guys. And I can't wait to see what the next chapter.